Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of distorting the agreement with the United States to end fighting in the Black Sea. Russia has insisted the limited maritime ceasefire will come into force only after certain sanctions have been lifted. Ukraine says the ceasefire should begin immediately. The agreement falls short of the full ceasefire initially envisaged, and in a rare criticism, Donald Trump has said Russia could be dragging its feet.
Therefore, there is no faith in the Russians here, but I believe that we will be constructive, and if this is the case, and the Minister of Defense confirms this to me by phone, then we will do our job to implement the agreement of the Ukraine-American meeting.
Volodymyr Zelensky, staying with Ukraine, Russia media say a court has sentenced a group of Ukrainian soldiers from the Azov Brigade. They defended the port city of Mariupol in the first months of the war in 2022. It is reported that 12 defendants received between 13 and 23 years in prison on terrorism and other charges. Well, for his assessment of these developments, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Laskiewicz, for joining us. So Russia and Ukraine appear to have agreed to end their fighting on the Black Sea and pause airstrikes on energy targets, but both have expressed little trust in even this limited deal holding, haven't they?
Yes. The fact of the matter is that Russia is reluctant to have a peace treaty at all because it is a present winning. And moreover, it wants, if there is going to be a peace treaty, on its terms. Ukraine, for its part, as indeed many Russia's neighbors, has little faith in the Russians keeping any sort of agreement. And unfortunately, Polish history demonstrates this because all 19 peace treaties with Russia were broken by the Russians. And so therefore, there's never going to be a simple ceasefire. There's never going to be a simple agreement. There's never going to be a time without mutual accusations. The Russians are specialists in tit-for-tat accusations, by the way, of course. A witness, for example, spying. Whenever someone expels Russian diplomats, they expel that nation's diplomats as well. And as for the negotiations, well, Russia's now doing the usual of extracting everything it can from them. Unquestionably, without the sanctions being lifted in some degree, the Russians won't implement a ceasefire. The question is, what is the minimum that they require?
Indeed, and Ukraine is now accusing Russia of lying to the Americans and saying Moscow was trying to distort and manipulate the deal. I mean, is there some truth to that?
It's hard to say for one simple reason. The most important part of the negotiations were, of course, held privately. President Zelensky is forever stating that Russia is not doing this or not doing that. And it could just be part of his PR. However, knowing the Russians, it would not remotely surprise me that they've gone one step further than agreed. Because the Russians, well, they do that. They play negotiations hard. From their point of view, there's another aspect, a hidden devil of a detail. They want the international banking system to re-accept them. And that, the SWIFT, is controlled by the EU. But the EU has made it clear it's not prepared to lift any sanctions until the Russians leave Ukraine. Now, this in itself means that there is no immediate view in sight of a ceasefire, because even if Ukraine were to say, okay, we're going to wait for these sanctions to be lifted, first of all, EU has to agree to this. And it's not likely to do that, and in fact cannot easily do that without appearing weak. So, as indeed one can suspect from the start, and indeed the Kremlin has stated, there is not going to be any simple ceasefire, partial or otherwise done quickly. Whatever is going to be done is going to be done by painstaking negotiations, and also it's going to take time.
And the Russians have called the Kyiv government Nazis and demanded guarantees from Washington that Ukraine would abide by the deal. But now there's been rare criticism of Russia from Donald Trump, suggesting on television that the country could be dragging its feet on the negotiations. What do you make of all that?
I think that this is the most significant thing that has emerged recently. For Donald Trump to utter any word of criticism is a very significant pointer. It's like in the old days when there was a king, and if he coughed at the wrong moment, it implied your opera was finished. And the same thing comes here. Everyone's literally hanging on every word and every gesture. And unquestionably, Donald Trump is a little annoyed that a ceasefire, albeit a partial one, is not going ahead quickly. And so from that point of view, yes, this is a significant development. The question is, what will Russia do? Will it insist upon these terms? And they, in fact, will involve the EU. And therefore, will Donald Trump shift his ire from Russia to the EU? We are now in a sort of grey area where it's hard to be certain what will happen. But there's no question of one thing. Donald Trump is no longer 100% praising everything that Russia does. And that is a significant step.
And on that note, I want to thank you exceedingly. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me there on the line from London.